the remaining true magicians. At this point, we might just have to round up the squad to hunt these people down. We got the new thread. This is surrounding a conversation that Arkawade and Shiki had in the Tsukihime remake. They say, why are there only 4 magicians when there's 5 true magics in the Nasuverse? And in the scene, you'll see Arkawade says, I do. She is one of the 4 magicians that exist in this world. And when she says she, Arkawade is talking about Alko. So just looking at what she said, I would leap out to say that Arkawade is referring to the fact that the Fate world and the Tsukihime world are separate. Nasu multiple times has went out of his way to make that distinction. So when she says in this world, it doesn't have to necessarily mean that the same thing went down in Fate. There are a bunch of characters that flip between Tsukihime and Fate, but they're usually just counterparts. Arkawade herself, Archetype Earth, Sion, the Aozaki sisters, Zelrech, etc. As far as the magician that's supposed to be left, we covered in the Mihoyo video that the witch, the person that created the first true magic, Yumina, is already deceased. This is going by the word of both worlds. The first true magic, one of the oldest true magics, but the details about it are unknown. What it involves appears to be common knowledge to some magi of privileged rank. The user of the first has already passed away, but it is said that the person that would be their heir is still alive, but barely. And this his is a mistranslation because we already know Yumina is a female. She was the ancestor to Alice, who was also a witch. This has been brought up in the story, in the profiles, many different places. Yes, there are male witches that exist, like Burl, for example, but the idea is that with Yumina being the original witch, this is something that trickled down from her later on. Yumina was friends with Zelrech, and apparently she has also shared a secret with Zelrech that still remains to be unheard of. Of course, we'll never hear that secret because we never see Zelrech anyway. But just something to put into the air. Due to his promise with Yumina and the fact that he is old acquaintances with the headmaster, he shows up now and then acts as an advisor for them. He has accepted the weakening of mage ideals as something that just happens. The thing about this translation is that it specifically points out the world in general, but when I look at another translation for the same scene, it doesn't say anything about the world. Arkawade just says, I know her, she is one of the 4 extant magicians. And so by that world being there, it kind of might lead into some confusion that shouldn't even really exist. And this is after her and Shiki have the conversation about the Dead Apostle hierarchy. I also did an entire video covering that, at least majority of it. One of the things that came up afterward is the glasses that Shiki wears to cover his mystic eyes, that being the mystic eye killers. Waver has a pair of these also when he becomes El Malloy II. When he gets older, he just has a different version. But in the scene, you have Arkawade asked to look at Shiki's glasses because she's concerned about the idea that those glasses are able to restrict his power, which lets her know that they aren't just run of the mill. He says, looking at all these lines gives me a headache. I put on my glasses and the miraculous scene before me fades back to reality. Do you not see the lines if you wear those glasses? Yeah, they were given to me by someone I met a long time ago, back when my eyes first became like this. Only the lens are original at this point, but it's thanks to these that I'm able to lead a normal life. I see, I guess that makes sense. It doesn't matter how strong your mind is, you'd eventually either go insane or gouge out your eyes if you had to look at death all the time. And that's another thing that I brought up in the Mystic Eyes overview. Let me see those for a sec. Shiki, is the person who gave you these in this city? I don't think so. This all happened 7 years ago, and she didn't seem like the kind of person to stay in one place for long. I see. Good. I'm glad we don't have another opponent to worry about. Though, if we're dealing with blue, it would be safer to just back off. Arkawade, are you telling me you know Sensei? I mean the person who made these glasses? So at that point, this leads into a couple of different things. Arkawade is already familiar with Alko, and this is why I mentioned that the Aozaki sisters are so tough, because by this point in time, Alko is fully grown, and even Arkawade doesn't want to run into her, which makes complete sense because she already thinks that Shiki is a monster for having the mystic eyes of death. To have something that's also true magic level, that being something like the 5th, it only makes sense that Arkaway would view her as a threat. She doesn't even want to run into her unprovoked, especially in her state while she's so severely weakened. I know her. She is one of the 4 extant magicians. These glasses are an extraordinary piece of craftsmanship. Much as it pains me to admit it, I can't even break them with my current strength. Wait, you were planning on breaking them? Geez, weren't you the one who said I'd go insane without these glasses? Or are you telling me that you want me to go crazy? No, that's not it. I just didn't like how much you cherish them is all. Whatever, just don't get any more crazy ideas. The memories of the time I spent with Sensei are precious to me, but more importantly, I wouldn't be able to go on living without these glasses. Who knows what would happen to my mind if I had a constant headache from seeing those lines all the time. And she says, I wonder if seeing death really does put a strain on your brain. So to circle back, one thing that I'll address here is that the mystic eyes, because this is more towards the beginning of the story, and the more that Shiki uses the eyes, the more he starts to put those stresses on his brain, and they eventually become too much to bear, and even to the point where even the glasses themselves can't contain them because the power is just growing stronger and stronger. This wasn't necessarily suited for a vessel like his, especially when he doesn't have a connection to the root like Ryogi. She can avert some of that strain, but he just has to deal with all of it outright. That's another thing that makes it so impressive. One thing that I mainly wanted to point out is Shiki asking Arkaway, does he know the person that made these glasses, who he believes to be Alko since she's the one that gave it to him. But we know that Alko is not the one that made these glasses. From multiple places, even the profile, we know that these glasses, the Mystic Eye Killers, are something that she stole from Toko, from the Kara no Kyokai materials, a magical construct capable of suppressing the power of Mystic Eyes. Since Mystic Eyes are a power derived from the Oculus, Mystic Eye Killers are commonly made into glasses. The glasses Toko wore are also Mystic Eye Killers. The protagonist of Tsukihime, Tono Shiki, acquired Mystic Eye Killers crafted by Toko from someone, that someone being Alko. They relieved him of the unbearable sight of death and allowed him to live normally again. This also reflected just how self-abusive Ryogi Shiki was, declining the Mystic Eye Killers. No, it was more an episode that reflected her heart of clear water. As a side note, Toko poured an obscene amount of money into constructing Ryogi Shiki's Mystic Eye Killers, but Shiki shoved them back saying, why should I do it to please you? Sounds exactly like her. The reason Shiki declined the Mystic Eye Killers was the same as when she refused to wear the uniform of the Rain Girls Academy. And so there it is. The idea is that Toko is actually the one that made the glasses. Alko stole them and then she enchanted them to make them unbreakable. This is something that she did of her own volition. This is something that never gets explored on her behalf. I've always found it very interesting that she was present at the beginning of Tsukihime. It kind of feels like Nasu's own way of this beautiful passing of the torch from a protagonist of one of his series to another. But she definitely had something like this in mind if they were already made to be unbreakable before she even ran into Shiki. So I love for them to delve more into that. The other thing is that just from these materials alone, we know that Ryogi was also offered a pair and she refused them. Going back into how there's two different worlds, it really depends on the direction of where Nasu wants to take these characters when they show up in the timeline on what happens to these glasses. Because if Shiki had a pair, then that means that there's two, technically three if you include waivers. And then there's all the anonymous wearers that it mentioned that may have a pair in the background. So it's interesting to know that, at least from what they're telling us, the glasses that Tono has are the same ones that were supposed to be given to Shiki, except she turned them down. It's like destiny almost, especially considering that he needs them way more than she does. Another thing that we realize from this is just that, Alko's ability to make things unbreakable. That's something that was not present in Mihoyo. So considering that her showing up here is one of the first in timeline appearances since that point, it speaks to a lot of growth that she's had in between. It's easy to think that this is something that's directly tied to the fifth magic, so that might give us a little more clues to what the fifth magic does actually, because up until this point, again, just like everything else, we only have clues, and by association of the fifth magic, she has now made these mystic codes practically indestructible. Really not even practically, because Arkawade is a true ancestor. It's literally one of the highest beings in the verse. If anybody were able to destroy something that's indestructible, it would be her. And she said that she can't break them, so it has to be tied to the fifth. So the fifth for sure can have some type of modification to the way that matter works. I will point out the fact that she said that she couldn't break it with her current power, and as per this point in the story, her current power is only rejuvenating. She said she would need at least 3 days to get back up to 30%, meaning that it's less than 10% of her original, because of course Shiki killed her at the beginning of the story when he sliced her into pieces. So after she put herself back together, she's saying that she can't do it. Possibly when she's at her full state, or even archetype Earth, I'm sure it will be no problem then. As far as these other magicians, we recognize Zelrech to be the creator of the second, at least as of right now. We know the creator of the first was the witch Yumina. That leaves 3 people left. The person that made the fifth. The fifth magic itself is something that trickled down from Alco's grandfather. He spent his life trying to unlock the fifth, not the actual creator, but he is the one that made the path for the rest of them. There's the third magic, that being the creator that taught the students that made the Ironsburn family, who is stated to still exist, but they also went MIA. And I pose the idea that whoever it is, if he still exists, then he has to be somewhere in the world chilling. We may even know them already and we don't know it yet. You know, there's a lot of lacking information about the head of the clock tower, for example. Not saying that it's him, but he has been alive for like 2 millenniums. You have to understand that the Ironsburns themselves were created a millennium ago from the time that the story started. That would be a real crazy tie-in. But it's also implied that, you know, the headmaster of the clock tower may be some type of knockoff of a vampire from Clock Tower 2015. Toko says, if only there were no lords, this place would be pretty livable. Pointless though it is to hope. They're even more stubborn than that vampire knockoff that's been running the clock tower for nearly 1,000 years, that being the headmaster Brishi-san. The funny thing about her saying this is that if he does have some tie to the third magic, we know that it's immortality, and we also know with her calling him a vampire knockoff but not a vampire specifically, vampires are known to have the curse of restoration, which is limited immortality. So it kind of leads me to believe the idea even more. We'll just have to see how they expound on that. But whatever the case, whoever made the third magic has to have been around for a long time if they're still running around at this point. It's a lot like the Zelrech situation. The fact that he's cool with that headmaster, the fact that he's cool with Yumina, who is also the original first magic wielder, also lends to the idea that that guy may be the user or the creator as well. You know, Zelrech stay tapped in. If you look at the materials for the third magician, it tells us that he disappeared. Well, that's what they say, but there are actually only 4 still alive. The magician that handled the first magic already died a long time ago. Of the remaining 4, 2 have disappeared and 2 are bothersome people that pop up all over the place, leaving trouble in their wake. So it never said that he died. It said that he went missing. The 2 that disappeared, of course, is the 3rd and the 4th, and then those bothersome people are Alco and Zelrech. As far as the Yumina death thing goes, now personally, I think this might be a bit of a farce, because why gas up a character just to tell us that they're dead? I feel like this is another situation, just like most series, but with Type Moon especially, it's probably just an in-universe lie to give us the runaround. A long time ago, I've solidified the fact that unless I see the person die on screen, I don't believe you. Hell, even if I do see them die on screen, I still might not believe you, because there's so many ways to get around it. She could have revived. For all we know, we are dealing with people on that level. She could have been reborn. She could have transferred herself into a different vessel. So technically that statement could be true and false at the same time. She could have faked her death. There's all types of loopholes to that. So until we get a little more on that, I'm gonna call cap. I have my suspicions raised. And then as far as the fourth magic, this this is easily the one that we know least about. We don't really know the users, we don't know the creator. All we know is that the person that made it is still alive somewhere. Again, I feel like this is a lot of missed potential and things that could have been included in FGO, especially how this could definitively circle back around from the original work and get people more involved, and also make good on the promises that you made, I don't know, damn near 2 decades ago when you introduced these magics. Realistically though, we're probably way more likely to get more exploration with works like El Malloy or Strange Fate, because they seem to be doing more exploring of those primal lore pieces a lot more than anything else. Not to say that FGO doesn't do it at all, because they did circle back around to ORT, and ORT has been around for a really long time. Also circle back around to Yumina in LB6, so that may be on the table. He's probably just spacing it out. As far as the comments on the thread go, because one is not there, of course, the one of the third, and this is referring to the original picture of that one magician that's missing from the world. Now, I don't know why he said the third in particular, especially knowing that they already told us that Yumina is dead and we know that the third is still alive. But we don't know if the third is still alive in the Tsukihime world. It's just kind of odd considering that they at least gave us a statement for Yumina. They didn't give us anything for the third magician. They just told us he's still there. To return to the main topic, the situation is somewhat complicated. The third magic itself existed before the Common Era, but it disappeared alongside the end of the gods. It cannot be recreated. And 1,000 years later, the one who recreated it was just Tsiah. The reason why the first is called the first is a very special reason to its special nature. And all of this gets into a really crazy timeline stemming all the way back to the point before Just Tsiah started her journey. We did that timeline in the first Holy Grail War video. But realistically, with them trying to give us the runaround, it could be either or. It could be the first or it could be the third. While there are 5 known magics, not all have a proper user. Like the third was lost until Stay Night with the completion of the Grail. I assume in this case they are counting the incomplete form. The first, whose last user was Yumina, who died a long time ago and is still unclaimed as there is no proper successor yet. While Yumina is dead, they still consider the magic to still exist, and there is one potential candidate. And just given off of the people that we've seen so far, it wasn't Alice, despite how specialized she was. It for sure wasn't Burrow or his mother. It wasn't Alice's mother. So if somebody's still out there that's a descendant of Yumina that can still properly weave in her powers. There is no third magician. The entire point of the Fuyuki Grail War is an elaborate attempt to fix that. So there's 2 sides to this, because there is some conflicting information about this. On one side that poses the idea that he's alive is the very nature of the magic itself. What is the third magic? It's literally immortality. So how is he dead if he's immortal? At the very worst, the person just hot bodies. The third magic, the materialization of the soul. In other words, the magic that realizes true immortality. When accomplished, the practitioner will acquire an unlimited source of magical energy due to the soul becoming analogous to a perpetual motion machine. This is the magic of the Ainsburn lineage, and the Holy Grail War was established to acquire this magic. So that's for the idea that he's alive. Then from the same set of materials, it also tells us a magician, just like a magus, has a long life. If one uses life prolonging magic, it wouldn't be possible to live a few hundred, a few thousands of years either. But the end will come for sure. And notice how the end is in quotation marks, kind of to insinuate that it's not the true definite end. Then would the death of a magician mean the death of the magic he uses? So I can take that this part of the materials isn't addressing the third magic. It doesn't say that much. But if the third magic does actually make you immortal, then you have to leave that out of the spectrum. There's no way that that applies here. But if that isn't the case, then the writing is impeding on itself, because you just said on one end it makes you immortal, and then on the other end you can't live for thousands of years. The end will come. The end could just be referring to that person needing a new vessel. That's also what I mean about not believing in any deaths. It could be exactly that. It could be the third magician just hot bodies and they haven't seen this person since they hot bodies, for all we know. There's a lot to pull from. You know, this kind of just ended up being a ramble, but there's a lot of things to weave together with the little that we've been given, and that's why I say all the time they need to explore this more, and a lot of people will want that also.